Hello, hello, fearless listeners. Are you ready for another episode of Let Fear Bounce? It's the podcast that's all about conquering challenges and facing our fears. I'm your host, Kim Lengling, and each week we'll dive into inspiring stories, expert insights, and practical tips to help you turn your fear into your greatest ally. So sit back, relax, grab that cup of coffee, and let's discover how to make fear our bouncing board towards a life filled with endless possibilities right here on Let Fear Bounce. Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Let Fear Bounce. This is Kim Lengling, your host, and I am so happy that you've decided to spend just a small part of your day with myself and my special guest today, Lisa Boehm. She is an author, and her life changed forever when her daughter, Katie, died suddenly in a car accident. And despite the heartache and the depression, she learned that life can be beautiful and meaningful again. She now focuses on gratitude and living intentionally as a way of honoring her daughter's memory. Now, again, she is an author of a book, but she is also the host of her very own podcast as well. And that podcast is called Rising Strong Podcast. Can't wait to dig into this and hear more about your podcast and your book. Lisa, welcome to Let Fear Bounce.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
There's all kinds of stuff to talk about. From your bio, I sit there and I, have all these little stars by, like ask this, talk about this. I want to hear about your book. Since I'm an author myself, I love talking to other authors and what makes them tick and what made them want to write. So let's start there, shall we?
Great place to start. Funny story about my book. If you would have asked me 10 years ago if I would ever write a book, I would have laughed out loud and said that it would be far more likely that I would scale Mount Everest. Writing, I was always a great English student, always got A's on all my papers, could put words together fine, but it wasn't a passion of mine. Funny story. Again, my daughter, the one who passed away, Katie, she was the writer. And I remember a couple of months after her car accident, I had this recurring image, like just a daydream kind of image, nothing weird, but of these dancers on stage with suitcases. And I had been to 1 million dance competitions, dance practices, and so on. Choreography was, something I was bombarded with all the time. But I thought, what is the meaning of this thought in my head? Pulled out my laptop, and within minutes, this beautiful short story came out of me. And it was, in a nutshell, it was about a suitcase and about how a man came to my house with this hideous, awful suitcase, handed it to me and left. And this short story is an analogy comparing this awful, heavy, hideous suitcase to grief. And at the end of the short story, I'm ultimately brave enough to unzip it and look inside. And inside of that ugly suitcase is all these beautiful memories and love and all of this thing, which is obviously symbolic of what my daughter is and was. And I had offers from magazines and some really quite influential places to publish the short story. And my gut kept telling me, no, there's something else here. Like, just put it away for a while because this is meant for more. And then more time passed, and I said to my husband, I want to write a book. And he said, you want to what? What on earth would you write about? And I said, well, our journey, like losing Katie. Because 8 years ago, when we lost her in a car accident, there weren't very good resources that were specific to losing a child, being a grieving mother, that weren't kind of this dark hole. I knew how awful it was. I wanted someone to tell me, you're gonna survive, and here are some helpful and heartfelt tips to help you. I couldn't find that. So when I got to a place where I felt that I could offer that to other people, that's what I wanted to write. And I said, I don't know what it's going to look like, but my starting point is my short story, which I called The Suitcase. And it sounds bizarre and a little woo-woo, but I swear that when my laptop was out and my hands were writing and I just let my hands go and let the keys type, that my daughter was helping me co-write that book. I really, really believe it. And a fun fact is my pen name is, I actually included her initial as my initial on the book cover. So on my book, it's Lisa K. Boehm, because the graphic artist and I that were working together to create the cover, I said, we have to include Katie in this. So I thought a feather or, other signs. Just didn't work. And then when I was, looking for website URLs and all this, believe it or not, Lisa Boehm was taken. So I was like, Lisa K. Boehm. So that's a little bit about the book, but it's, like I say, it's not so much here's my sad story, because honestly, nobody wants to read my sad story. Anybody who has their own sad story is looking for helpful tips, helpful strategies, what got me through. Because the honest story, which I don't include in my book, I wasn't ready to tell this part of my story until recently, but I suffered with suicidal ideation for a period of time. I would literally count out sleeping pills. And at the time, my husband and I, had been doing a lot of traveling, and we would collect wine from wherever we traveled, either to share with friends or to have in our wine rack. And we had a pretty substantial wine rack. And I just remember counting out pills, counting out wine bottles, and really trying to figure out how I could get to the other side to be with my daughter. I realized, it's just like somebody really slapped me in the head, and just the thought occurred to me. When my daughter died, my son was 15. He had zero coping skills, zero tools in his tool belt other than pot and anger. And it was just, I don't know how it came, but it was just like, whoa. And I realized that if I did something and took my own life, that my son would never, ever get his feet back underneath him. So that's kind of what ended those suicidal thoughts very, very abruptly. But it was a long, arduous crawl out of that dark hole. And like I say, I really was not transparent about my mental health. I'm fine. I'm good. I got to be an expert at convincing people, including my own husband, that I was fine. He didn't find out about the suicidal ideation until 4 years later, when he overheard me practicing for a talk that I was about to give. And he literally walked past the door, backed up a few steps, and he said, "What did you just say? How come you never told me?" So there was that piece. And now that we are 8 years in, my son is now 23. I'm really happy to say that he's doing really, really well. But he also hit the wall this past summer when he had a whole bunch of really difficult things happen. A long-term girlfriend broke up with him. His grandfather passed away. Our family dog, who's really been a therapy dog, nearly lost his life. He had his eye removed. A whole bunch of really hard things were going on. And my son finally came to me and he said, "You know what, Mom? I think I need help." And I said, "I think you do too." So I helped him coordinate finding somebody to talk to, and like in my entire, like my life, my coworkers, myself, my son, my brother, my neighbors, so many people that I know well are struggling with mental health. And I knew that that was my truth as well. And my mental health struggles go back 23 years. But I never felt that it was okay to talk about them. And so now that this has all come full circle, that is what my podcast is about, is mental health, every aspect. And it's just continues to be a journey.
Indeed, it is a journey. I live with PTSD, so I know what that journey feels like from my perspective, and how just how dark and bumpy it can be. And for you to freely admit, now it took you a while, and it usually does, say that you had, suicidal thoughts running through your brain. You were actually counting out pills and counting out wine bottles. I mean, obviously you were thinking of, could I do it this way? Could I do it that way? When you realized what you were doing, were you fearful in that moment? Or were you just thinking, if I can just do this, I'll be done?
That's a great question. I think I wanted the pain to end.
So you just wanted to sigh and say, I'll do
I
that
think
and I'll be
so.
done.
Well, and just the intense missing that you have after you lose a loved one, you miss them so much, their voice, the sound, the everything. And the intense missing was just almost like a wave that kept pulling me down, kept pulling me down. And at that moment, I felt like I couldn't see beyond my pain. It was just that little moment where I realized that my decision, if I were to follow through, would affect so many people.
Hmm.
And that was stronger than this call to silence the pain. But I certainly had my own glimpse into how people can get into that darkness.
It's a bit scary, isn't it?
Very,
Yes. When you're
very.
there, when you're in that moment. I've had that once, and I hadn't had it for years and years, living with PTSD. But then I did this one time, and well, I said, I tell folks, it scared the bejesus right out of me. And I actually called my counselor and said, I've never had a thought like this. And it is so scary because I can't do this to other people. And thankfully, I was able to recognize, oh my gosh, what are you, Kim? You know, but it's a very, what's the word I'm looking for? It feels like it, in that moment, I don't have that thought anymore, but in that moment, for whatever reason, that day that I had it, it just seemed like the easiest thing.
And all encompassing. Like you
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. It was
cannot
just,
think about it.
yes, that was it. It was like it was a visceral feeling.
Absolutely.
And you're thinking, gosh, how easy. I'd just be done. And thankfully, whatever, my brain went, whoa, mayday, mayday, what are you doing? And it was literally like a switch had happened for me anyway. It was like a mental switch, literally like sirens, mayday, mayday, man down, what are you doing? And I called my counselor immediately. I've literally never shared that before because I resonate with what you were saying.
Hmm.
When you were counting the pills and the wine bottles. I mean, it takes focus to do that.
And yet, oddly enough, and I'm thankful for this, my brain kept getting stuck because the question my brain had was, do you take the pills first or do you drink the wine first? And it was like my brain couldn't get past that, thankfully. And I guess that was part of perhaps my rational brain who was saying, we're not going there, girlfriend. We're not figuring this out because we're not doing this. But I also in that moment realized that the line between irrational thinking and rational thinking, you and I both had the wherewithal, the rational part of our brain that we're going, whoa, nah. But I could see that line was very, very gray and very, very smudged, and
Yes.
how easy it would be to just slide to the other side.
And I
Mhm.
used to be one of those people thinking, how could they do that? That's so selfish.
Yeah, me
Because
too.
I didn't know how to deal with grief. Like I've had several friends take their own lives.
Mm.
And I went, the whole 5 stages, doing the 5 stages of grief and stuff. But a lot of times I would get stuck on anger, you know. Oh, how selfish that they would do it, until you find yourself in that darkest moment of your life and you realize, like you said, the line is very smudged and it would be very easy to just slide across it. And thankfully, as you said, we both had that rational part kick back in. And I like how you worded it. You said your brain got stuck. So that was, a safety mechanism that your brain was like, got to do something to get her attention. Thank you for sharing that. That's a lot. That's a lot to share. So I do appreciate the vulnerability that you just shared.
Well, I've come to terms over the 8 years after losing my daughter and observing those that I care about that we are just brutal at being transparent, right? We, and I shouldn't say we, I'm going to just say I here because I don't want to group everybody together. But sadly, at the age of 55, I still care too damn much about what other people think. And God forbid that they think that maybe I'm not as strong as I want to be seen for. And so I held it in. You know, my parents didn't know, my son didn't know, my husband didn't know. I'm fine. I am freaking fine.
It sounds like, total different circumstances, but you and I have very similar stories. Very, very similar stories. Because I too, for years and years, was fine. There's nothing wrong. Carry on. I'm fine. Good to go. Yeah, and everybody looks at you like, wow, she's one of the strongest women I've ever met. And I'm thinking, if you could peek inside here and see the wreck that was going on in there right now. Did you ever watch Fraggle Rock or the Muppets when your kids were little?
Yeah.
Do you remember Fraggle Rock and all the little doozers? The
Yeah.
ones that they were constantly building stuff that all of the Muppets were constantly breaking, and they were constantly building, and the Muppets would break and they would build. That's sometimes that's what I picture in my head. Little doozers just busily, working away, trying to keep everything built up and strong and steady and, the way it should be. Little doozers.
Yep.
That's I'm showing my age because I'm 56, so we're right around the same age. But yeah, those little doozers. If anybody out there didn't ever watch Fraggle Rock, Google it, it'll come up on YouTube. Fun little videos that the Muppets made. Little sidetrack there. I loved Fraggle Rock. My daughter and I used to watch it all the time and it always made me laugh. Um, okay, so you got the book out there. When was the book published, by the way?
In 2019.
So is that available on the United States Amazon?
You betcha. Yep.
Okay. And
Yes.
all of this stuff will be in the show notes, folks. So her book, and share the name of the book, please.
It's called Journey to Healing, A Mother's Guide to Navigating Child Loss.
Awesome. So folks, hop on Amazon for that. If everyone knows someone who has lost someone, and if you feel that it would be a good tool for someone, please check it out. And that will be in the show notes as well. But I want to talk about your podcast and where that came from, because that's relatively new. You've just started that, relatively recently. So share with the listeners the name of your podcast and the type of guest you have on, why you wanted to start the podcast, and all that good stuff.
It's called Rising Strong: Mental Health and Resilience. And it really comes about because of my fascination with people's stories. If I meet you for the first time, we're having a coffee, I am going to ask you questions. And I love listening to people's stories. And more than that, I am always drawn to those people who have one of those amazing stories where not only they go through the hard stuff, but they somehow find their way through it and they do become stronger. I know, as somebody who was called so strong on my journey and really wanted to scream, I think that we do become strong, right? We've got two choices. When we're handed stuff that we don't want to deal with, we can either crumple and lay on the floor, or we can eventually get strong enough to carry it, because that stuff doesn't go away. My grief is not done. There are actually no 5 stages to grief. It's one continuum, and it's a big, messy continuum. So my grief, I have gotten stronger by learning to carry it. But my fascination with people's stories, and even really in my own community, because I started to think, well, gosh, if I do this podcast, where am I going to start? Where am I going to find these stories? Well, frankly, in my own backyard.
Hmm.
So far, I think everybody but one is just from people that I've met face to face with some truly inspirational stories. So that's where it started. And at the end of every episode, we talk about what resilience means to that person and why they consider themselves resilient and how they got there. And it's always sharing these little nuggets of information of what's helped them. Because if we go back in time, even in my own grief journey, that's where I got the helpful ideas to cope with my own grief. I remember going to a grief group and meeting a fantastic, inspiring woman who swore by grief yoga. Well, guess what I was doing next week? Because I thought, man, if that helped her and she's doing pretty good, I'm going to try that. And then I met a woman who really, really was into journaling. So I tried journaling. So I think that if I can create something that inspires other people and it can give other people these tools, these nuggets, these tips, then that's what it's all about, is helping each other out.
Couldn't agree more. That's why I started Let Fear Bounce.
Exactly.
Well, it sounds awesome. And so you said you've just I think before I hit record, you said you have what, 30 or a little over 30 episodes in now?
Correct. Yep. I'm just
It's
getting ready to wrap up season 1.
awesome. Awesome. And those are, you said, folks from your backyard. So you have like the world to expand to.
Exactly. I know there's so much more out there.
There are so many. I have over 200 episodes and each one has been an amazing story. And I'm blessed over and over and over again with the people like yourself that I have on the show to share. And because no story is the same as any others, might be similar, but it's not the same. Find a lot of similarities, and you find out, I have found, and you can tell me if you found the same for yourself. I have found that by all of the people that I've been blessed to talk to, and that they actually, make themselves vulnerable enough and they're generous enough to share their story in the hopes that others gain something from it. All of those things that have come, all those nuggets, like you said, and I always say, tossing out nuggets of hope. You catch them, you end up your bucket's filling up. It's filling up with goodness,
I
so
agree.
and the world needs more of it. So you
Mhm.
might be getting on and talking about heavy stuff, but you have no idea the weight that you're taking off of someone else that might be listening to your show. And what a beautiful picture that is. I love your suitcase analogy at the beginning. That their dirty, messed up, scruffed up suitcase, and then when you finally unzipped it, inside was all kinds of beautiful things.
Mhm.
And it's like, people putting on masks. It's a way that things are masked. You can have a pretty outside and the inside's all messed up, or you can have an ugly outside and the inside's absolutely beautiful. It all depends on your perspective.
Oh, yes, and that is something that we could talk about for hours. I am a big
Another episode.
believer. Could be,
Yeah.
a big believer that our mindsets and the perspectives that we choose, because it is a choice.
Yes, it is.
And that, again, is something that I struggled with in my own grief journey, because we all do grief and, frankly, adversity differently, right? We have different personalities. We come from different upbringings. We bring different things from our lives into the adversity. But from the beginning, I felt really strongly that I I was not going to let death win. Death had already taken way too much from me, and that I wanted to do my daughter proud, however that looked like. I always imagine her kind of looking down on me and, from heaven. And it's like, that's my mom, because I want to make her proud. I don't want her to go, oh God, Mom,
Yeah, what is
you
she
know,
doing?
right? Like, get up off the floor, Mom. You got stuff to do. And she was spicy and saucy like that. So she would say that.
That's
Um,
what, well, my brain, it's like, if I find myself having certain days, certain days, and I'm sure you have days too,
yeah.
I'll be like, all right, Kim, pull up your big girl panties. Let's just go. You know, this is nothing compared to what you've been through. Pull up your big girl
Yeah,
panties. Let's face the day. Let's go. You know,
exactly.
that's my mindset. I'm one of those ones like, I'm just going to power through it. But everybody, like you said, everybody, you look at it different, you face it different, you deal with it different, you walk through it different. Everybody's journey is completely different, but all those little tiny pieces that you can resonate with can be so helpful to others if people are willing to share. And I'm really glad that you're willing to share.
Well, like I said from the beginning, I wanted to share change rather the narrative around grief. I was I've always tried since Katie died, I've always tried to, dare I say, grieve positively, grieve in a way that honors her, grieve in a way that ensures that I can shine my light brighter for those who might need it. And I think that there is healing when we can help other people, whatever that looks like. And yet, in my own grief journey, I have been shamed for trying to grieve positively. And actually, I dulled myself for several years. Even when I wrote the book, I felt like I couldn't fully express that thought. And now that I'm over 8 years out, and I'm kind of, and maybe it's part of that getting older thing too, not really given as much concern to other people's thoughts, but it's like, here I am. Here's my grief. This is how I do it. It may not be the way you choose to do your grief, and that's okay. But I choose to grieve with light and love and hope. That's
Well,
what helps.
and maybe those folks that have a different viewpoint, they're in a different spot that
Yeah.
they're not able to see the light yet. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's their journey and that's on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like how, because I can completely understand and resonate again. I'm using that word a lot, about, reaching a certain age in life where just don't care what other people think because my life is not theirs.
Yeah.
I don't need to please other people. And if people don't like what I'm doing or what I'm saying or what I'm wearing, whatever, that's on them. It's none of my business what they think of me because I just don't care.
Yeah, and isn't that freeing? And doesn't it
Oh,
just feel like it takes a
yes.
weight off your shoulders and you're like, here I am, world,
Right. Yeah.
lighter,
Take me. That's
happier.
right. I was made wonky and weird for a reason. And now I'm just going to embrace it, you know, just going to embrace it. And yeah, because other people, they suck all the goodness and joy and energy right out of your life if you let them.
Some can, for sure.
And there's too much negative floating around in the world already. There's too much negative and darkness that's thrown at us through the media and social media, everywhere you turn,
Hmm.
everywhere you turn. So I decided a few years ago, probably right around the time I hit 50, it's like, not my slice of the world. I'm not letting that in. It's not coming in anymore. Am I putting my head in the sand and ignoring it? No, I know what's going on, but I don't have to let it all in and embrace it and be angry and bitter along with everybody else. 'Cause that's not how I want to live my life.
Exactly. Life's too short for that.
It is too short, way too short, and people need to remember that. And unfortunately, sometimes they get, slammed in your face reminders of it.
Hmm.
If all of a sudden they run into something and they can't handle it. So, settle down, folks. Settle down. Let the light in. Hop out of your bitterness and your darkness and seek help when you need to. There's no shame in that either.
Not at all.
Not at all. Not at all. That's why when you talked about your son, you said, he came to you and you said, I need help. That's so encouraging for a young person to
Yeah,
recognize that and say, hey, I need help. It's very encouraging. And hopefully, if there's someone out there listening today that's younger and might be going through some pretty heavy stuff, whatever your journey is, always remember you're not alone, and you don't have to walk that scariness alone. There are people out there that can help you.
absolutely. One of my friends and I, we joke, but say it in all seriousness. We all need a therapist. And truly, I think so. Like, and whether you think you need to go or not, like I've got mine scheduled. It's just on my schedule. It's just like going to the dentist. It's just like going for a physical. They're a part of my care team. And I think it's as important as anything else. Really.
Maintenance. So I could
Yes. Yes.
continued maintenance. Yeah, no, I understand and I agree. I do agree. This has been awesome. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. Good luck with your podcast.
Thank you.
I'm gonna have to tune in and listen to some of the episodes. But yeah, lots of good stuff and a lot of good nuggets that you shared with folks. And I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing some of this stuff. And I am positive that some of the listeners are grabbing onto it. And it's hitting home right exactly where it's supposed to hit and who it's supposed to land on. So I do appreciate your time and spending part of your day with me. If you could let folks know where they can find you online and all of that. And then also I ask all of my guests to toss out a nugget of hope to our listeners, something that they can tuck away in their pocket and carry with them for the rest of the day.
Best place to find me on social media is on Instagram. My handle is Rising Strong Podcast, which is also the website where you can find my podcasts. And my little nugget of hope, can I share a story to answer that? I'll keep it short.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So about 6 months after we lost Katie, we started taking short weekends away together, just as a way to learn how to be a family of three again. It's a lot harder than you think. And we were walking the coast of British Columbia, Canada. It was a gorgeous, stellar July day. And I remember walking along the coast. The ocean is lapping at my feet. The sun is warm on my shoulders. Beautiful scenery everywhere. And I remember tipping my head back, soaking in the sun and smiling and feeling genuinely happy. But in the next millisecond, feeling so guilty and beating myself up that I had felt happy. How the hell could I feel happy when my child had died? And that was the moment that I realized that I could carry grief and pain in one hand, joy, laughter, lightness, whatever you want to call it in the other. And that our emotions are not silos. We never are experiencing one emotion, and that we can be all these things. We can be okay and be sad. We can be broken and we can go to a party and be happy, so that we need to stop judging ourselves and just be humans. We are humans. We are meant to feel whatever that is that we're feeling.
Good nugget. And what a powerful story. That's a really good visual that you gave there. You're in this beautiful, serene spot walking with your family, and you smiled because you genuinely felt happy for that moment. And then, snap of a finger, you felt guilty for smiling and being happy. Happens probably to way more people than, well, no, I think it probably happens to everybody at one point in their lives. And it's a guilt thing. It's an automatic guilt thing, isn't it? It's
And
like
that's
it just jumps
ridiculous.
right in there. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's
Who,
no
who
need for it.
teaches us that?
I don't know. I've taken on this new thought, and maybe it's crazy, but I think maybe, just maybe, if I smile, maybe I can make my daughter in heaven smile. Maybe when I smile, she smiles.
Maybe she's smiling and she's making you smile.
Or there's that. Never know.
We don't, do we? And
No,
we won't until we get where we're supposed to be going
when
for
it's our
whatever
time.
people's beliefs are.
Exactly.
Thank you again so much for being my guest. This has been a true pleasure.
It's my pleasure. Pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Everybody out there listening, thanks so much for spending just a small part of your day today with myself and my special guest today. So this is Kim Lengling, your host of Let Fear Bounce. Everybody be well, stay well, and be blessed. And that is a wrap, my fearless friends. Thanks for bouncing along with me on another episode of Let Fear Bounce. I hope you're feeling a bit motivated and ready to take on any challenge that might come your way in the coming days. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode of Let Fear Bounce. Tune in each week for your dose of inspiration from my amazing guests from all over the world. So until next time, keep bouncing forward and stay fearless, my friends. Everybody be well, stay well, and above all, be blessed.